She ran from her own wedding with the dress weighing down her shoulders and her heart racing. She knew the wolves could track her within minutes, so she ran as fast as she could. And she saw a carriage stopped on the deserted road. No coachman, no one in sight, her only refuge. She opened the door, threw herself inside, and curled up on the floor, certain she was alone. When she lifted her eyes and found a man dressed in black watching her, panic took over. Elowen Hale yanked off her shoe and hurled it at him, her only weapon. The shoe hit the stranger's chest and he merely tilted his head, amused, because he was no stranger. He was Ray Strymore, the Alpha King, the same man she had slapped months earlier, the man she never thought she would run into again like this. Chapter 1. The dress grew heavier with every step. Elowen Hale felt the white fabric pulling her shoulders down, as if the gown itself knew she shouldn't be there. The flowers woven into her hair scratched her scalp. The smell of candles and incense filled the chapel to the point of suffocation. Her fingers trembled around the bouquet, petals falling one by one onto the stone floor as she walked. Just a few more steps. Just smile. Just run. The thought shot through her mind like lightning. Run. The word echoed in her chest, beating in sync with her racing heart. She lifted her eyes and saw Lucien Moorhaven standing beside the priest, that confident smile on his lips. The dark green velvet coat impeccable over his broad shoulders. He was handsome. He always had been. Since childhood, when they ran together through the fields of his estate, when he held her hand under the trees and swore they would marry one day. But now, as she looked at him, all Elowen could see was the image she couldn't erase. Lucien's hands on Evelyn's waist, her own sister, pressed against the stable wall 3 nights earlier, his mouth on Evelyn's neck. The low moan Evelyn let out, a sound Elowen should have been the only one to draw from him. Her throat tightened. She swallowed hard, forcing a smile as she stepped forward again, and again. The priest began to speak, but his words dissolved into a distant hum. All she could hear was her own blood pounding in her ears. You don't have to do this. You don't have to. But she did, didn't she? The Hale estate was on the brink of ruin. Her father had lost almost everything in poorly planned business deals. Her mother cried every night, hidden in her room, thinking no one heard. And Lucien. Lucien owned land across the entire region, wealthy, powerful, a noble wolf whose family controlled the trade of wool, grain, everything. Marrying him meant saving her family. She took another step. Lucien watched her with those brown eyes she used to love. He had knelt before her the night before, holding her hands, begging for forgiveness. It was a moment of weakness, Elowen. I love you. I've always loved you. Please don't leave me. She had wanted to believe him. Wanted so badly. But she couldn't. Run. The thought hit so hard she almost stumbled. Her eyes widened. The bouquet slipped from her fingers and crashed onto the floor with a dull thud. White petals scattered over the stones. Everyone in the chapel went silent. Lucien frowned. Elowen? She didn't respond. She couldn't. Because in that moment, something inside her simply shattered. And then she ran. She turned and bolted, clutching the skirts of her dress with both hands, her shoes pounding against the floor, while gasps and shouts erupted behind her. The chapel doors burst open when she shoved them, and the cool afternoon air slapped her face. She didn't stop. She didn't look back. She just ran. Elowen, come back! Lucien's voice thundered behind her, rough with anger. She heard heavy footsteps. Many footsteps. His family. Wolves. They could track anything. Anyone. Except you. Not if you use the vial. Elowen threw herself to the side, hiding behind an abandoned cart at the back of the estate. Her hands trembled so violently she could barely hold her shoe. With desperate fingers, she reached for the tiny glass vial hidden inside the padded fabric of the heel. It was the size of her thumb, filled with an amber liquid that smelled of bitter herbs. The healer. She remembered the gray-haired woman who lived on the edge of the forest, the one everyone called a witch. 2 days earlier, Elowen had gone to her in desperation, begging for something that could hide her scent from wolves. "Planning to flee, child?" the healer had asked, her dark eyes locked onto Elowen's. Or simply preparing for the possibility? Elowen hadn't known the answer. She had kept the vial, convinced she would never use it. Lucian had apologized. He had cried. He had promised to change. But now, crouched behind that cart, her heart pounding so hard it hurt, she uncorked the vial and poured the liquid over her dress, her neck, her wrists. The smell was awful, but she didn't care. She cared about nothing except disappearing. "She's around here. Search everywhere," one of Lucian's brothers shouted across the property. Elowen stood and ran again, this time toward the road. The forest was close. If she could reach it, if she could hide among the trees. But then she saw a carriage. It stood alone on the road, with 2 massive black horses harnessed to the front. It was an elegant carriage, the kind only someone very wealthy would own. Dark polished wood, gold trimmings along the edges, velvet curtains covering the windows. No coachman. No one in sight. Elowen didn't think. She didn't have time to. She simply ran to the door, opened it, and threw herself inside, collapsing to her knees on the carriage floor. The door slammed shut behind her. She curled up, breathless, her chest rising and falling so fast she thought she might faint. That's when she smelled it. Expensive tobacco, damp leather, and something else. Something warm and heavy that made every hair on her body stand on end. Slowly, very slowly, Elowen lifted her eyes, and she wasn't alone. He sat on the opposite seat, one leg crossed over the other, his arms stretched across the backrest. Dressed in black from head to toe. A black velvet tunic embroidered in silver, black leather gloves. His dark short hair was slightly tousled, as if he had run his fingers through it recently. His eyes were a stormy gray, fixed on her with an intensity that made her stomach twist. Rey Alfa, the Alpha King. Elowen felt all the air leave her lungs. She couldn't move, couldn't breathe, because out of all the places she could have hidden, she had climbed into his carriage. Rey said nothing. He simply watched her, his head slightly tilted, those eyes tracing every inch of her face as if memorizing it. There was something dangerous in that gaze, something that made Elowen want to run and freeze at the same time. He raised an eyebrow. Quite the entrance. His voice was low, smooth, but with a sharp edge buried beneath the words. Elowen tried to speak, but her throat had closed. All she managed was a dry swallow, her eyes wide. He was at the wedding. He saw me. He knows. The memory crashed into her. 6 months earlier, at Lucian's estate. Race had arrived to discuss business, land, trade. Elowen had been there, sitting beside Lucian, trying to look like the perfect bride. But then Race looked at her, and kept looking. And his words, those cursed words. "So you're Moorhaven's future wife." He had said it with a faint smile, barely there, as he tilted his head toward her. Fascinating. Fascinating, she had echoed, confused. To see someone so young already, so certain of her future. His eyes gleamed. Or is it not certainty? Perhaps it's just acceptance. Elowen had felt her cheeks burn. "Your Majesty doesn't know me well enough to make those assumptions." True. He had smiled then, a slow smile that did something strange to her stomach. "But I'd like to." And later that night, when they were alone in the corridor, He had said something she could never forget. "You're not happy with him." It wasn't a question. It was a statement, and something about the way he said it, that low, firm voice, had made Elowen lose control. "How dare you? To make observations?" He stepped closer, and she backed up until her spine hit the wall. "Or to care? You don't care. You don't even know me. Then let me." His eyes were so close now, so intense. "Tell me, what do you truly want, Elowen Hale?" He paused, his head tipping slightly as if considering something. Then, in that low, dangerously smooth voice, he added, "And while you think about that, maybe you should notice that your fiancé hasn't stopped looking at your sister. Curious, don't you think?" Elowen's blood had frozen, then boiled, because he had said aloud what she pretended not to see, what she buried deep every night, and hearing it from him, from that arrogant man who shouldn't even be paying attention. And she, the fool she was, had raised her hand and slapped him. The sound echoed through the empty corridor. Race had blinked, surprised, his hand rising to touch his reddened cheek. For a moment, Elowen thought he would yell, punish her, do anything. But he laughed, softly, almost inaudibly. But he laughed. "Spirit," he murmured, eyes shining with something she couldn't name. "Well, at least you have that." Elowen had fled, her heart pounding wildly, her hands trembling. And now she was here, hiding in his carriage, breathless, dusty, and with her wedding dress crumpled. Race shifted, and Elowen flinched instinctively. But he only leaned forward, elbows on his knees, that infuriatingly small smile on his lips. "Should I ask?" he said, far too casually for the situation. "Or will you tell me yourself why you're hiding on the floor of my carriage wearing a wedding dress?" Elowen opened her mouth, closed it. Tried to find words, any words, but all that came out was a strangled sound, and then, from outside, she heard it. "Elowen, Elowen, where are you?" Lucian's voice, hoarse and desperate. Footsteps, many footsteps. His family, sniffing, searching. Panic detonated in her chest. She looked at Race, her eyes wide, pleading silently. He studied her for a long moment. Then, slowly, he raised a finger to his lips. Silence. Chapter 2. The silence inside the carriage was so dense that Elowen could hear her own heart beating. Race did not move. He remained seated, that finger still pressed against his lips, his eyes locked on hers with an intensity that made the air feel heavier. Outside, footsteps drew closer. Voices. She recognized Lucian's voice, hoarse and desperate, shouting her name. She recognized his brothers, too, his cousins, all of them searching. The sound of boots on the gravel road echoed nearer and nearer. "They are going to find me. They are going to drag me back." Elowen pressed her hands to her chest, trying to control her ragged breathing. The white dress was crushed around her knees, layers of fabric making her feel like she was suffocating. She wanted to disappear, wanted the earth to open up and swallow her whole. And then she heard Lucian's voice right beside the carriage. "Your Majesty?" He knocked on the window, the sound making Elowen jump. "Your Majesty, are you there?" Russ did not answer immediately. Instead, his eyes stayed on Elowen for one more second, studying her. There was something in that gaze she could not decipher. It was not pity. It was not amusement. It was something deeper, darker. Then, with a movement so quick she barely had time to process it, he grabbed her. His hands closed around her arms and lifted her from the floor with frightening ease, pulling her onto the seat beside him. Before she could protest, before she could even breathe, he snatched up the black cloak folded at his side and threw it over her, covering her completely. The heavy fabric fell over her head and body, hiding every last glimpse of white from the wedding dress, and then he pulled her even closer, pressing her against his chest. Llewellyn went utterly still. She could feel his warmth through the cloak, through the velvet coat, through everything. She could hear his heartbeat, steady and strong, right against her ear. The scent of tobacco and leather wrapped around her, mixed with something that was uniquely his, something warm and masculine that made her senses spin. What is he doing? Why is he helping me? Moorhaven. Race's voice came out calm, almost bored, as if there were not a woman hiding beneath his cloak. He opened the window curtain with one hand, the other still holding Llewellyn against him. Is there a problem? Forgive me for disturbing you, Your Majesty. Lucian's voice was tight, breathless. My fiancée. She ran away. I am looking for her. Has Your Majesty seen her by any chance? There was a pause. Llewellyn held her breath, her body rigid against Race's chest. She could feel his hand on her back, firm, keeping her in place. Your fiancée. Race repeated the words slowly, as if tasting them. Yes, she was. Lucian hesitated. She was confused, frightened. She did not know what she was doing. The sound Race made was almost a growl. And you think she would run into my carriage? I do not know where else she could have gone. Her scent vanished. It is as if she evaporated. Race was silent for a moment. Llewellyn could feel his chest rise and fall with each breath. Then he spoke, his voice so cold it made even her shiver. Perhaps she evaporated on purpose, Moorhaven. Has that crossed your mind? Lucian did not answer right away. When he did, there was a thread of anger in his voice. With all due respect, Your Majesty, that is none of your concern. No. Race leaned closer to the window, and Llewellyn felt his body shift, pulling her with him. Because it seems to me that a woman running from her own wedding is exactly the kind of thing that should concern me, especially when the man she is running from comes knocking on my door demanding answers. A tense silence followed. Llewellyn could picture Lucian's expression, that clenched jaw, his brown eyes blazing with barely contained fury. I am not demanding anything, Your Majesty. I am merely asking for help. Then here is my help. Race's voice came out soft, almost gentle, but there was steel hidden in those words. Go home, Moorhaven. If your fiancée ran, she had her reasons. And if she wanted to be found, she would not have gone to such lengths to disappear. Your Majesty, I am alone in the carriage, if that is what you are wondering. Race cut in, his patience clearly thinning. And frankly, I am tired of this conversation. I have a long journey ahead, and I would like to continue. Another silence. Llewellyn could hear Lucian's heavy breathing on the other side of the window. She imagined his hands clenched into fists, his jaw locked, all that wounded pride boiling just beneath the surface. Very well, Lucian finally said, his voice tight. My apologies for disturbing you, Your Majesty. Accepted. The footsteps receded. Llewellyn waited, still pressed against Race's chest, hardly daring to breathe. She heard Lucian call to his brothers, ordering them to search elsewhere. The voices grew more distant, the footsteps moving away down the road. And then, at last, silence. But Race did not let her go. Llewellyn remained there, wrapped in his cloak, her face pressed to his velvet coat, her heart pounding so hard she was sure he could feel it. She ought to pull away. She ought to say something. But she could not move, could not think. Because for the first time in weeks, she felt safe. What is wrong with me? He is gone. Race's voice came from above her, low and rough, but he still did not release her. Slowly, very slowly, Llewellyn lifted her head. The cloak slipped from her shoulders, pooling around her waist. She looked up and found his eyes already locked on hers. They were so close now. Dangerously close. She could see every detail of his face, the strong lines of his jaw, the shadow of stubble, the way his lips were slightly parted. And those eyes, heavens, those eyes felt capable of seeing straight through her. "Why did you do that?" she whispered, her voice breaking. Race tilted his head, still holding her. "Do what?" "Protect me. Lie for me." "Why?" For a moment he did not answer. He simply studied her, those eyes searching her face as if looking for something. Then slowly, a small smile curved his lips. It was not a happy smile. It was something darker, more dangerous. "Because," he said, his voice low and weighted with something that made her stomach twist. "Any man who drives a woman to run from her own wedding does not deserve to find her." Race, moments earlier, he felt her before he even saw her. It was a sharp, violent tug in his chest that made Race lift his head inside the carriage. His whole body went tense, every wolf instinct roaring to life. And then the door burst open and she hurled herself inside, dropping to her knees on the carriage floor, breathless. That cursed white dress fanned out around her like a cloud. Alawan. Her name thundered through his mind. He could not move, could not breathe, because there she was, the woman who haunted him every night, the woman whose scent he had memorized after a single encounter, the woman he had just seen walking toward another man's altar barely half an hour ago. He had tried to watch the ceremony, but every step she took toward the groom felt like something tearing inside him. He could not bear to see the rest. He had risen and left before his own wolf betrayed the mask he wore. And if she was here now, it was because she had run. Something fierce and primal roared inside him. Satisfaction, relief, and a desire so intense he had to dig his claws into the seat to keep himself from moving. She ran. She did not marry him. But then he saw the fear in her eyes, saw the panic, and something deeper surged through him. Protection, the overwhelming need to keep that woman safe, to let no one touch her, to destroy any threat that dared come near. My mate. She is my mate. Always. And he could not tell her. Not when she had never once felt the connection he felt. To her, he was just a stranger. A frightening king she had dared to slap 6 months ago. That slap. He could still feel the sting on his cheek, still remember the sheer shock that hit him. No one, in his entire life, had ever dared raise a hand to him. And she had done it without hesitation, her eyes blazing with fury. That was when he knew he was lost. And now she was here, hiding against his chest, trembling, and all he wanted was to wrap her in his arms and never let her go. But he could not. So he settled for keeping her close, just for this moment, while he lied to the man who did not deserve to breathe the same air she did. Race finally let her go, leaning back against the seat with that infuriating calm he seemed to have mastered. Alawan pulled away quickly, pressing her back against the opposite wall of the carriage, her heart still pounding out of control. She felt exposed, vulnerable, as if those eyes could see every secret she had ever kept. He spoke suddenly, knocking twice on the roof of the carriage. The carriage jolted and began to move. "Wait!" Alawan leaned forward, eyes wide. "What are you doing?" "Leaving, obviously." He folded his arms, that small smile still on his lips. "Unless you would prefer that I go back and hand you over to your groom?" "No, I—" She swallowed hard, her hands twisting in the fabric of her dress. "Please, please, can you take me far away from here? I will owe you. Whatever you want. But get me out of here and I will manage on my own later." Ray studied her for a long moment, his head tilted. There was something in the way he looked at her that made her stomach knot. "Do not worry," he said at last, his voice low and steady. "No one is going to lay a hand on you. You are under my protection now." The words knocked the air from Elowen's lungs and she blinked, speechless. Protection. From him. The Alpha King everyone feared, the one with a reputation for being cruel and ruthless. "I do not understand," she whispered. "Why are you doing this?" Race did not answer right away. He simply watched her, those eyes. Then he leaned forward, elbows on his knees, his face dangerously close to hers. "Because," he said, his voice rough, "you slapped me, and any woman brave enough to do that deserves a second chance at life." Elowen felt her face burn. The memory of that night rushed back with full force, the way she had lost control, how her hand had moved before her mind could stop it. I should not have done that," she muttered, lowering her gaze. "Should not?" He tilted his head, and there was something almost amused in his tone. "I disagree. I think it was exactly what you should have done." She looked up, confused. "But I hit the king." "And?" He leaned back again, that maddening smile returning. "Do you think no one has ever hit me before?" Elowen had no idea what to say. "But you are frightening, cruel, feared." He finished the thoughts for her, his eyes gleaming. "Yes, I know. That is what everyone says." A heavy silence settled in the carriage. Elowen studied him. Really studied him. For the first time. He was everything the stories claimed and more. Tall, strong, with broad shoulders that filled out the black coat as if it had been sewn onto his body. His face was all hard lines and sharp angles, but there was a strange beauty in it, something magnetic that drew the eye and refused to let it go. And that smile. Heavens, that smile. It was dangerous. It was sarcastic. It was... "By the way," Race said suddenly, shattering her thoughts, "that dress of yours is awful." Elowen blinked, startled. "What?" "The dress." He gestured vaguely in her direction. "Awful. You look like a gift box. If you were marrying me, I would never allow them to dress you like that." For a moment, Elowen just stared at him, unable to believe what she had just heard. And then, despite everything, despite the fear and the panic and the confusion, something inside her snapped. She bent down, yanked one of the white silk shoes off her foot, and threw it at him. "Good thing I'm not marrying you." The shoe hit him in the chest with a dull thump before dropping to the floor of the carriage. Race looked at the shoe, then at her. And then that slow, dangerous smile curved his lips. "Well," he said, his voice low and rough, "now I am going to have to punish you for that." Elowen's blood ran cold. She shrank back into the corner of the carriage, eyes wide. "What have I done?" "I threw a shoe at the king. He is going to lock me up. He is going to..." But then Race leaned forward, picked the shoe up from the floor, and examined it with that infuriating smile still on his face. When his eyes lifted to hers again, there was something dangerous and amused in them at the same time. "Calm down," he murmured, his voice dropping an octave. "I am not going to bite you, unless you want me to." Elowen's face went up in flames. She opened her mouth, shut it, unable to form a single word. His smile widened, clearly pleased with the reaction he had provoked. And then, to her complete astonishment, he held the shoe out to her. "Here. You are going to need this when we arrive." Elowen took the shoe with trembling hands, still processing what had just happened. He was joking with her? Flirting? She could not tell. Everything about him was so confusing, so contradictory. "Good thing you are not marrying me, then," he murmured, his eyes glinting with something that made her stomach twist as he leaned back against the seat again. Elowen quickly looked away, clutching the shoe to her chest, her heart racing so fast she thought it might burst. The journey was long and quiet. Elowen stayed in her corner of the carriage, watching the landscape roll by through the window. The road wound between hills, dense forests, and eventually began to climb. Mountains. They were heading into the mountains. She glanced sideways at Race. He was reclined on the seat, eyes closed, arms crossed over his chest. He looked relaxed, almost asleep, but there was a tension in his shoulders that suggested otherwise. He was alert, always alert. "Where are we going?" she finally asked, breaking the silence. Race opened his eyes, those gray irises finding her. "My castle." "Your—" Elowen swallowed. "I cannot stay in your castle." "Why not?" Because it is not appropriate." He gave a crooked smile and said, "Yes, I know. But unless you have somewhere else to go, I suggest you accept my hospitality." Elowen opened her mouth to protest, then closed it again. Because he was right. She had nowhere to go. She could not return home, not with Lucian and his family hunting for her. She had no friends who could take her in without asking questions. She had no money. She had nothing. "I will find somewhere," she said weakly. "Of course you will." Race did not sound the least bit convinced. "But until then, you stay with me. Stay with me." The words echoed in her mind, loaded with something she could not name. Elowen looked away, feeling her cheeks heat again. She did not understand what was happening, did not understand why he was being so kind? No, kind was not the right word. He was not kind, but he was helping her. Why? "Relax." His voice came low, almost gentle. "No one will hurt you there. You are safe." Safe. What a strange word. She had not felt safe in weeks, not since she had seen Lucian with Evelyn, not since her parents began pushing the wedding, not since her entire life started to crumble. But now, in this carriage, with this dangerous man sitting across from her, she felt protected, and that scared her more than anything else. The castle appeared at dusk, cut against the orange sky like a giant shadow. Elowen pressed her face to the window, eyes wide, heart pounding. It was magnificent. Built of dark stone, the castle rose along the mountainside, with tall towers that seemed to touch the clouds. Enormous windows reflected the light of the setting sun, casting a golden glow that contrasted with the black stone. And the view. The view was breathtaking. From where she sat, Elowen could see green valleys stretching toward the horizon, rivers winding through the landscape, and above it all, the vast open sky, already beginning to reveal the first stars. "It is beautiful," she whispered, not realizing she had spoken aloud. "Yes," Race replied. But when she looked at him, she realized he was not looking at the castle. He was looking at her. Elowen quickly looked away. "Why does he keep looking at me like that?" The carriage stopped before the main gates. Race stepped out first, then extended his hand to help her down. Elowen hesitated for only a second before placing her hand in his. The leather glove was soft, but she could feel the strength in his fingers as he held her firmly, guiding her out. The mountain air was fresh, almost cold, a welcome change after the stuffy heat of the carriage. Elowen drew in a deep breath, feeling something in her chest loosen just a little. "Come," Race said, still holding her hand. "I will show you your room." He led her through the gates, along stone corridors lit by torches, until they reached a grand staircase. The steps seemed endless, but at last they stopped before a dark wooden door. Race opened it, revealing a room that took Elowen's breath away. It was enormous. The bed was big enough for 4 people. A fire crackled in the hearth, filling the room with warmth. And the windows. The windows were massive, stretching from floor to ceiling, offering a perfect view of the valley below and the star-strewn sky above. "You may stay here," Race said, releasing her hand. "There are clothes in the wardrobe. Hot water will be brought up soon. If you need anything, my servants are at your disposal." Elowen turned to him, words caught in her throat. Thank you. For everything." Ray studied her for a long moment. Then he nodded and turned to leave. Chapter 3. The morning light streamed through the windows like golden fingers, brushing Elowen's face and pulling her out of the deepest sleep she had had in weeks. She blinked, disoriented for a moment, before remembering where she was. The enormous room. The view of the mountains. Race. She sat up, running her hands through her tangled hair. She had taken off the wedding dress the night before and found a soft linen nightgown in the wardrobe. Now, in the daylight, everything felt different, less urgent, less frightening, and at the same time, more real. I ran. I really ran. A soft knock on the door pulled her from her thoughts. "Come in," she called, her voice still rough with sleep. The door opened and a young servant entered carrying a tray. "Good morning, my lady," she said with a curtsy. "I brought hot water for your bath, and His Majesty asked me to guide you to the dining hall when you are ready." Elowen felt her stomach tighten. "His Majesty wants me to have breakfast with him?" "Yes, my lady. He is waiting. Waiting for me." Half an hour later, Elowen was dressed in a simple dark green wool dress she had found in the wardrobe. It was pretty, well-fitted, but not elaborate. Comfortable. She pinned part of her hair back, letting the rest fall in waves over her shoulders, and followed the servant through the stone corridors. The castle was even more impressive in daylight. Sunbeams spilled through the tall windows, casting shifting patterns of light and shadow on the walls. And everywhere, through every window, the mountains rose majestically against the blue sky. The servant stopped before two large double doors made of dark wood and pushed them open, revealing a room that stole Elowen's breath. It was a dining hall, but unlike any she had ever seen. Windows covered the entire back wall, from floor to ceiling, offering a panoramic view of the mountains and valleys below. Morning light flooded the space, making everything glow. A long, polished wooden table sat at the center, already set with fruit, breads, cheeses, and pitchers of juice. And there, seated at the head of the table, was Race. Elowen froze in the doorway, unable to move for a moment. He looked different in daylight, less shadowed, less threatening. He still wore black. A simple linen shirt with the sleeves rolled up to his elbows, revealing strong, sun-kissed forearms. His dark hair was slightly tousled, as if he had run his hands through it recently. And when he lifted his eyes and saw her standing there, those storm-gray irises caught the sunlight and glimmered like molten silver. Something in her chest tightened. "Good morning," he said, his voice gentle. It was not the sarcastic tone from the night before. It was warm, almost soft. "Good morning," she replied, forcing her legs to move. She crossed the room and sat at his right side, maintaining a respectable distance. Race gestured toward the food. "Help yourself. I hope you slept well." Yes, thank you." She picked up a piece of bread just to keep her hands busy. "The room is beautiful." "I am glad you liked it." Silence. Elowen bit her lip, unsure of what to say. Being near him now, with the sunlight revealing every detail of his face, felt different. She could see the faint scars near his jawline, the strong line of his throat, the way his fingers held the teacup with unexpected delicacy. "Why am I looking at him like that?" "So," Race said at last, setting down his cup, "are you going to tell me why you ran?" Elowen lifted her eyes, startled. He studied her with that steady intensity, waiting. There was no judgment in his gaze, only curiosity. She lowered her eyes to the bread in her hands. You were right. About what? About him. About... She swallowed, the words scraping her throat. Lucien. He was having an affair with my sister. I saw them. Nights before the wedding. The silence that followed was heavy. When Elowen finally gathered the courage to look up, she found Race's jaw clenched, his eyes dark. Your sister, he repeated, his voice dangerously low. Yes. Elowen felt tears sting her eyes, but blinked them away. Evelyn. I saw them in the stable. His hands were all over her, and she was moaning his name. Race's hand curled into a fist on the table. Elowen watched the knuckles turn white before he drew a slow breath and forced himself to relax. And still, he said carefully, you were going to marry him. My parents, they need this marriage. Our estate is failing. And Lucien, he begged for forgiveness. He cried, said it was a moment of weakness. She let out a bitter laugh. I wanted to believe him. I wanted to so badly. But you did not. No. She shook her head. Not when I was walking toward the altar. Not when I looked at him and all I could see was that image. Him with her. So I ran. Race said nothing for a long moment. He simply watched her, those eyes scanning her face. Then he leaned forward, elbows on the table, his face closer to hers. You did the right thing, he said, his voice firm. Elowen felt something inside her loosen. I don't know. My parents will be devastated. My family. Your family will survive. But you? He tilted his head. Would you have survived a marriage with a man who betrayed you with your own sister? The words hit her like a blow. Because no, she would not have survived. Not truly. She would have withered slowly, suffocated by lies and betrayal, until nothing of her remained. Thank you, she whispered. For saying that. Ray smiled. One of those small smiles that made something flip in her stomach. Then he leaned back again, lifting his teacup. How did you hide your scent? He asked suddenly, shifting the subject. Moorhaven's wolves should have tracked you easily. Elowen blinked, surprised by the question. I used a vial. A forest healer gave it to me. She said it would muffle my scent. Race's eyes glimmered. Clever. There was something like admiration in his voice. So you planned to run from the start? Not exactly. I kept the vial only as a precaution. I didn't think I'd actually use it. But then, when I was there, she shook her head. Something in me just broke. Survival instinct. He took another sip of tea, still watching her. It is powerful. Elowen studied him for a moment. Morning light poured through the windows behind him, creating a golden halo around his head and shoulders. He looked almost unreal like this. Strong. Powerful. And yet, there was a gentleness in the way he looked at her that made her heart race. Stop it. You just ran from a wedding. The last thing you need is... But she could not finish the thought. Because when she looked at Race, when she saw the way the light danced in his eyes, the way his lips curved in those small smiles, all she felt was attraction. Pure and simple. And terrifying. Feel free to explore the castle, Ras said suddenly, breaking her thoughts. The servants know you are here. If you need anything, just ask. The days that followed passed in a strange haze. Elowen explored the castle, discovering hidden libraries full of old books, indoor gardens with crystal fountains, and corridors that seemed to stretch endlessly. She met the servants, who treated her with respect and kindness, as if her presence there were the most natural thing in the world. And she saw Reyes. Not constantly, but often enough to feel his presence everywhere. He had responsibilities, meetings with advisors, letters to answer. But always, in the late afternoon, she found him somewhere. In the library, in the gardens, in the main hall. And they talked. Not about deep things. Not yet. Just small things. Favorite books. Places they had visited. Foods they liked. But every conversation added another layer to how she understood him. And every time he smiled, every time his eyes lit with amusement, she felt that attraction grow a little more. But that night, Elowen found herself unable to sleep. The full moon shone through her windows, casting silver patterns on the floor. She rose, pulled a robe over her nightgown, and stepped into the corridor. The castle was quiet at night, but not silent. She could hear the wind howling outside, the faint crackling of distant fireplaces, the occasional rustle of curtains. Her bare feet made little sound on the cold stone as she wandered, with no specific destination in mind. She saw a light, coming from a door at the end of a corridor she had not explored yet. Candlelight, flickering and warm. She approached slowly, curious, and noticed the door was slightly ajar. An office. She could see shelves full of books, a large desk covered with papers and maps, and a figure sitting behind it, head bent over some document. Race. Elowen hesitated in the doorway, unsure if she should interrupt. But then, without lifting his eyes from the paper, he spoke. "I can hear you. Do you want to come in?" She sucked in a breath, startled. How did he... "Wolves have sharp hearing," he said, still not looking up, though there was a smile in his voice. "And you breathe louder when you are nervous." Elowen felt her face burn. Slowly, she pushed the door open and stepped inside. The office was cozy despite its size. A fireplace filled the space with warmth. Shelves covered 3 walls, overflowing with books of all shapes and sizes. And the window behind the desk offered a view of the moonlit forest. Reyes finally lifted his eyes, and something in his expression softened when he saw her. His gray eyes brightened with the candlelight. "Cannot sleep?" he asked. "No." She folded her arms, suddenly aware of how lightly dressed she was. Just a nightgown and robe. "I hope I'm not interrupting." "Never." He stood and walked to a small table where a kettle sat. "Hot chocolate?" Elowen blinked. "You have hot chocolate?" "I do." He picked up 2 cups. "It is my secret vice. Do not tell anyone or my fearsome king reputation will be ruined." She could not help the laugh that escaped her. The idea of that powerful, intimidating man drinking hot chocolate in the middle of the night was adorable. "Your secret is safe with me," she promised, accepting the cup he handed her. They sat by the fireplace, Reyes in a leather armchair, Elowen in another, the small table between them. She took a sip of the chocolate and sighed. "So," Reyes said, leaning back in his chair, the cup balanced in one hand, "you enjoy exploring the castle at night." It was not a question, but Elowen answered anyway. "It is peaceful at night, quiet, I can think." "And what do you think about?" "About you," she almost said. Instead, she shrugged. "Everything. How I ended up here. What I will do now." Reyes studied her over the rim of his cup, those penetrating eyes. "You do not need to decide now. Stay as long as you need." "But I cannot stay forever," she said softly. "Eventually, I will have to face my family. I will have to face Moorhaven," he finished for her, his voice darkening. "Yes. He will not harm you." The words came out firm, almost like a vow. Not while I am alive. Elowen lifted her eyes, startled by the intensity in his tone. There was something fierce in his expression, something primal and protective that made her heart race. "Why do you care so much?" she asked quietly. "You barely know me." Race was silent for a long time. Then he lowered his cup and leaned forward, elbows on his knees, his face dangerously close to hers. "Maybe," he said, his voice rough. "I want to know you." The air between them shifted, grew heavier, warmer. Elowen could feel her heart pounding against her ribs. She could see the way his eyes flicked briefly to her mouth before returning to her eyes. "He is looking at my mouth." The thought struck her like lightning, sending heat through her entire body. She swallowed hard, her throat suddenly dry. And then, because she needed to break that tension before she did something foolish, she forced a smile and said, "Why are you so feared if you are so gentle?" Race blinked, clearly not expecting the question. Then he let out a low laugh, shaking his head. "Gentle," he repeated, as if the word tasted foreign. "Keep talking like that, and you will ruin my evil Alpha King reputation." "Cute, too," she added, her smile widening. "You are cute." "Cute?" He raised a brow, though amusement glinted in his eyes. "Now you are exaggerating." "I am being honest." Elowen leaned back, the tension easing. "Everyone speaks of you as if you were a monster. But since I arrived here, you have been none of that." Race's smile faded slowly. He studied her for a long moment, something flickering in his expression she could not identify. Then he sighed and leaned back as well, his eyes returning to the fire. "My family has a reputation," he began, his voice low. "My father, my mother. They were powerful alphas, feared by other kingdoms. There were stories about them, about the things they did during the wars. Terrible things." Elowen remained silent, waiting. "But what no one knew," Race continued, eyes still on the flames, "was that it was all deliberate. The cruelty, the infamy. It was a mask, a strategy." "Strategy?" she asked, frowning. "There was a kingdom in the north, powerful, cruel. They started wars, destroyed lands, enslaved people. My parents knew they could not defeat them in open battle. So they did something smarter." He looked at her. "They became monsters." A chill ran down Elowen's spine. "They built a reputation," Race said. "Made other kingdoms fear them. Then they allied themselves with the Northern Kingdom, earned their trust. And when the moment was right, my parents betrayed them. Spread distrust within their ranks, weakened them from the inside, sabotaged their plans until they collapsed. And the war ended," Elowen whispered. "Yes, but the reputation remained." He smiled, but there was no humor in it. "My parents died 5 years ago, and I inherited not only the kingdom but also the reputation. The fearsome king, the alpha no one dares cross. But you are not like that," she said firmly. Race looked at her, surprised. "You are not," she repeated. "Your servants respect you, but do not fear you. You drink hot chocolate at night. You—" She hesitated. "You saved me. Without asking for anything in return." Something intense flickered in his eyes. "Yet," he murmured. Elowen felt her face warm, but she did not look away. "Thank you for telling me this." "I did not tell you everything," he admitted. "There is more, but—" He shook his head. "Another time." She nodded, respecting his boundary. They sat in silence for a while, simply watching the fire, sipping their chocolate. It was comfortable, peaceful, as if they had done this 1,000 times before. When Elowyn finally stood to return to her room, Race walked her to the door. "Good night, Elowyn," he said softly. "Good night." She was about to leave when she felt his fingers brush lightly against her arm, stopping her. She turned, startled, finding him closer than she expected. "Sleep well," he murmured, those gray eyes locked on hers. And then he stepped away, returning to the office, leaving Elowyn standing there with her heart racing and her arm tingling where he had touched her. A week passed. Elowyn adapted to the routine of the castle, its rhythms and silences. She woke early, ate breakfast alone or sometimes with Race, explored the gardens, read in the library, and at night, almost always, she found herself drifting back to that office. And Race was always there, waiting. They talked about everything and nothing. He told her more about his childhood, about the brutal training his father subjected him to, about the gentle mother who balanced her husband's cruelty with love. She told him about her own family, about growing up in Evelyn's shadow, always the less beautiful, the less interesting sister, about Lucian, and how she once believed he loved her. "He never loved you," Race had said one night, his voice firm. "Not the way you deserve to be loved." And something in the way he said it, with that steady intensity, made Elowyn's heart stumble. She began to notice small things about him, the way he smiled when he thought she was not looking, how his eyes followed her when she moved around the room, how he always made sure her cup of chocolate was full, how he kept a respectful distance, never touching her unless absolutely necessary, yet always close enough for her to feel his warmth, and she realized, with a breathless jolt, that she was beginning to feel something deep. No, not this fast, not after Lucian, but her heart did not care about logic. And every time she looked at Race, every time he smiled, that feeling grew. Elowyn stepped into the office that night and found Race waiting. He had prepared hot chocolate for them both and lit the fireplace, filling the room with warmth and golden light. "You are becoming predictable," he said with a small smile when she sat. "Every night, same time." "And you are always here waiting," she shot back. "What does that say about you?" "That I am a hopeful fool." The words slipped out before he could stop them, and Elowyn saw something flicker across his face. Surprise, maybe regret. "Hopeful about what?" she asked softly. Race did not answer right away. He simply looked at her, those gray eyes so intense she felt as if he could see through her. "You asked about my story," he said at last. "About why I am feared. I told you part of it, but there is more. I am listening." He drew a deep breath, as if preparing himself. "My parents were not just strategists. They were powerful. My father had the strength of 10 men. My mother could sense danger before it arrived. And I..." He looked down at his hands. "I inherited all of it. The strength, the instincts, the abilities." Elowyn leaned in, fascinated. "I was trained from childhood," he continued. "Trained to fight, to lead, to protect. And when my parents died, when the weight of the kingdom fell on me, I knew I had to keep the facade. Had to be the terrifying king everyone expected, because if I showed weakness, other kingdoms would try to conquer us. But you are not cruel," Elowyn said firmly. "No." He met her eyes. "But I am capable of cruelty, if it means protecting my people, if it means keeping my kingdom safe. I would do anything." The silence that followed was thick. Elowyn absorbed his words, understanding at last the weight he carried, the mask he wore, the loneliness that came with power. "That must be lonely," she whispered. Something cracked in his expression. "It is. You have no one." "I have my people, my advisors, my guards. He paused. But someone with whom I can simply be myself? No, not until... He stopped, as if he had said too much. Until? She prompted gently. Race looked at her for a long moment. Then slowly, he rose and walked to the window, hands clasped behind his back. Until you, he said at last, so softly she barely heard. Elowen's heart stopped. She stood too, her legs trembling. Race! He turned, and the expression on his face stole her breath. There was vulnerability, desire, and something deeper, something so intense it knocked the air from her lungs. You have no idea what you do to me, he said, his voice raw. From the moment I saw you, from that damned slap, I cannot stop thinking about you. Elowen stepped toward him, unable to stop herself. I feel the same. His eyes widened. What? I think about you too, she admitted, her face burning. All the time, and I shouldn't. I just ran from a wedding. I should be devastated. But when I am near you, I just... Just what? He stepped toward her, closing the distance. I just want you closer, she whispered. Something shifted in his face, darker, fiercer. And then, with a low growl that sent shivers down her spine, he closed the distance and pulled her into his arms. His mouth met hers with a hunger that stole every breath she had. It was not gentle, not careful. It was pure need, pure desire, as if he were starving and she were sustenance. Elowen clung to him, her hands sliding up his chest, around his neck, burying themselves in his hair. She had never been kissed like this, never felt this. With Lucian, kisses were pleasant, soft. But this was fire. Her entire body lit up, every nerve sparking as his mouth moved against hers, his tongue teasing, exploring, claiming. She moaned into him and felt his body shudder in response. His hands gripped her waist, pulling her closer, and then one moved up, threading through her hair, tilting her head so he could deepen the kiss. She could feel his strength, the power restrained beneath the surface, but also the gentleness, the care with which he held her, as if she were something precious he feared breaking. When they finally broke apart, both were breathless. Race pressed his forehead to hers, eyes closed, his breathing uneven. Elowen, he whispered, his voice wrecked. You have no idea what you are doing to me. Show me, she breathed, surprising herself. His eyes opened, those storm-gray irises now nearly black. And then he kissed her again, and she lost herself entirely in him, in his heat, in his taste, in the way he held her as if he never wanted to let her go. And for the first time in her life, Elowen understood desire, understood passion, understood what it felt like to burn from the inside out, and love every second of it. Race's thoughts. She is here, in my arms, kissing me as if her life depends on it. The thought almost brought him to his knees. Race knew he should stop. Knew he was dangerously close to crossing a line he could never uncross. But gods, she tasted so good, so perfect, as if she had been made for him, because she is his mate. The truth roared inside him, his wolf instinct screaming to claim her, to mark her, to make her his in every way. But he held himself back, because she did not know. She did not feel the bond as he did. For her, this was only attraction, only desire. And if he told her, if he revealed she was his mate, destined for him by the laws of nature, she would run, or worse, stay out of obligation, not choice. No, she must choose. She must fall in love with me before I tell her the truth. It was selfish. He knew that, but he could not help it. Because for the first time in his life, Race Drymore, the feared Alpha King, was completely, irreversibly in love, and he wanted her to love him in return. When they finally pulled apart for the last time, Elowen was trembling, her legs weak. Race held her steady, his gray eyes scanning her face with an intensity that made her blush. "I should go," she whispered, but did not move. "You should," he agreed, but did not release her. They stood like that for another long moment, simply looking at each other, the air between them still charged. And then, reluctantly, Ray stepped back, his hands sliding from her arms. "Good night, Elowen," he said, his voice low. "Good night." She left the office in a daze, her heart still racing, her lips still tingling. And when she reached her room and lay in bed, all she could think about was him. What is happening to me? But deep down, she already knew the answer. She was falling in love with the Alpha King, and that was both the most terrifying and the most thrilling thing that had ever happened to her. Chapter 4. The morning came far too quickly. Elowen had barely slept. Every time she closed her eyes, she felt Race's mouth on hers again, his hands on her waist, the heat that had consumed her entirely. She had spent the whole night tossing and turning in bed, her body still humming with the memory of that kiss, her heart pounding so hard it felt like it might burst out of her chest. But even as guilt tried to creep in, she could not feel regret. Because that kiss had been the realest thing she had ever felt in her life. Now, standing in front of the mirror as she fixed her hair, she wondered what it would be like to see him again. What would she say? What would he say? Would it be awkward? Would it be... Stop overthinking. She took a deep breath, smoothed the dark blue dress she had chosen, and left the room. Her footsteps echoed through the stone corridors as she headed toward the dining hall, her stomach tight with nerves and something else. Anticipation. When she pushed the doors open and stepped inside, the first thing she saw was him. Race was standing near the window, his hands clasped behind his back, staring out at the mountains. Morning light poured in around him, outlining his profile, highlighting the strong line of his jaw and the broad set of his shoulders beneath his black shirt. He seemed lost in thought, so still she hesitated in the doorway. And then he turned. Their eyes met across the room, and the air simply vanished. There was something different in those gray eyes now, something more intense, hungrier, as if he were seeing her for the first time, or maybe seeing her in a completely new way. His gaze swept over her, tracing her face, sliding down her neck, before returning to her eyes. And then he smiled, that small, dangerous smile that made her stomach flip. "Good morning," he said, his voice rough, as if he had not used it much yet. "Good morning," she replied, forcing her legs to move. She crossed the room and sat down, trying to ignore the way her hands were trembling. Race moved back to the table and sat at the head, closer to her than on previous days. Close enough that she could smell him. "Stop it." "Did you sleep well?" he asked, and there was something in his tone that suggested he knew exactly how poorly she had slept. "More or less," she admitted, reaching for a cup of tea just to have something to do with her hands. "And you?" "I did not sleep at all." The words hit her like a blow. She lifted her eyes, startled, and found him already watching her with such intensity that her face flushed. She did not know what to say. "Race, about last night. Do not regret it." The words came out firm, almost like a command. "Please do not regret it." "I am not regretting it," she said quickly. I do not know what it meant. What we..." He leaned forward, his eyes locked on hers. "It meant that I want you." And that Unless I read everything wrong, you want me too." Her heart stopped. Then it took off. Because he was right. Gods, he was so right. "I do," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I want you, but I do not know if I should. I just ran away from a wedding. I am supposed to be devastated? Crying over a man who betrayed you?" Race shook his head. "Or maybe you are supposed to let yourself feel something real for the first time in your life." The words knocked the breath from her lungs, because once again, he was seeing straight through her, seeing things she barely dared admit to herself. She was about to answer when the dining hall doors flew open. A guard entered, breathing hard, his face flushed as if he had been running. "Your Majesty, forgive the intrusion." Race turned, his expression shifting instantly into that king's mask. "What is it?" "A messenger has arrived, from Halebrook." The guard glanced at Elowen, hesitating. "There is news about the lady's family." Elowen's blood turned to ice. She shot to her feet so fast the chair nearly toppled. "What? What news?" The guard swallowed. "Your mother, my lady, she has fallen ill, gravely. Since you disappeared, she has not eaten or slept. The physicians say it is her heart. She is dying." The world spun. Elowen grabbed the edge of the table to steady herself, all the color draining from her face. My mother is dying. Because of me. Elowen." Race's voice was beside her now, his hands closing around her arms, steadying her. "Breathe." But she could not breathe. She could not think. All she could see was her mother's face, pale and sick, wasting away because her daughter had run like a coward. "I have to go," she said, her voice thin and broken. "I have to go back. She is like this because of me." "It is not your fault," Race said firmly, turning her to face him. "My mother is dying." The words tore out of her like a scream, and tears began to streak down her cheeks. "She is dying because I was selfish, because I ran instead of—" "I have to go," she repeated, her voice shaking. "I have to see her. I have to. I am going with you." Elowen blinked, stunned. "What?" "I am going with you," Race repeated, his tone unwavering. "Do you really think I am going to let you go back alone? But you have responsibilities here. You cannot just—" "I am the king," he cut in, that small smile returning. "I can do whatever I want, and what I want is to go with you." Something clenched inside her chest. Relief, gratitude, and something deeper she could not name. "Thank you," she whispered. He nodded, then turned to the guard. "Prepare the carriage. We leave in half an hour." The journey back was different from the first. Elowen sat on the same bench where she had once hidden herself 2 weeks earlier, but now everything felt changed. She was not running. She was returning. And the man seated across from her was no longer a terrifying stranger. He was the man who had kissed her the night before, as if he were dying of thirst and she were water. She tore her gaze away. The scenery rolled past the window, green hills giving way to cultivated fields, then to small villages. They were getting closer to Halebrook, closer to her old life. And I do not want to go. Race thought, tell her. Now, before it is too late. The thought screamed in his mind, pounding against his skull with painful insistence. The words were there, lodged in his throat, choking him. But he could not force them out. He could not find the courage. How was he supposed to say it? How could he explain? Elowen, you are my mate. I knew you before I ever knew you. I dreamed of you for an entire year before I saw you for the first time. No, she would think he was mad, or worse, think he was inventing everything just to manipulate her. Race closed his eyes, memories crashing over him like an avalanche. It had started a year earlier. The dreams. At first they were vague, fractured images that made no sense. A woman, with brown hair and green eyes. He did not see her face clearly, only the eyes. Those damned green eyes that seemed to see straight through him. He saw her crying. Alone in a room, her hands covering her face, her shoulders shaking. And he would wake with his chest tight, overwhelmed by a desperate need to find her, to wipe her tears away, to tell her everything would be all right. On other nights, he saw her trapped in nightmares. She tossed in bed, screaming, drenched in sweat, and he wanted to be there, wanted to hold her, wanted to protect her from whatever haunted her. And then there were the good dreams. She was standing in a field, the wind tugging at her hair, a small smile on her lips. She was lying on the grass, staring up at the stars. She was laughing, head tipped back, free. Those dreams were the worst, because when he woke, her absence was physical. It hurt, as if something essential were missing. He had gone to elders, healers, anyone who might explain. And they all said the same thing. Mate. He was dreaming of his mate. But where was she? How could he find her? Then he happened to be traveling near Halebrook. Not for any particular reason, just inspecting the borders of his kingdom. And suddenly, he felt it. A pull. Strong. Violent. As if something invisible had grabbed hold of his chest and yanked hard. He nearly fell from his horse at the intensity of it. His wolf roared to life, every instinct screaming a single word. Here. She is here. The Moorhaven estate was nearby. And Race, on an impulse he still did not fully understand, decided to go there. He invented some excuse about business, about land, about trade. Anything to give him a legitimate reason to appear. Lucien Moorhaven had been surprised, of course. A king did not simply arrive unannounced, but he was smart enough not to question it, to welcome Race with all the pomp and ceremony his rank demanded. And then Race saw her. She was in the drawing room, seated beside Lucien, dressed in light blue, her hands folded delicately in her lap. And when she lifted her eyes and looked at him, it was her, the woman from his dreams. Literally. Those green eyes, that face. She was real. She existed. And she was right there, close enough that he could have touched her if he reached out. But she felt nothing. He saw it in her gaze. There was no recognition. No answering pull like the one tearing through him so intensely he could barely breathe. To her, he was just a stranger. The king. Nothing more. And worse, she was engaged. Engaged to that arrogant fool sitting beside her, his hand possessively resting on her knee. His mate, promised to another man. The rage had been blinding. His instincts howled at him to knock that hand away, to tear Moorhaven from her side, to claim her right there. But he held himself back. Because doing so would have been madness. It would have meant starting a war. So he stayed, and watched. And the more he watched, the more he saw. She was not happy. He saw it in her eyes, in the tension in her shoulders, in the way she smiled, but the smile never reached her gaze. And when he caught Lucien watching her sister with that thinly veiled hunger, everything clicked into place. He was betraying her, and she either did not know, or was pretending not to. Race should have kept his mouth shut. He should have been wise. But when he found himself alone with her in the corridor, with the chance to speak without Moorhaven hovering nearby, the words tumbled out before he could stop them. Your fiancé cannot stop looking at your sister. And she slapped him. The slap was hard, ringing down the empty corridor. His cheek burned. But it had been. perfect, because it meant she had spirit. It meant she was not passive. It meant there was fire in her. And now, weeks later, she was here, returning. And he had not told her, had not said she was his mate, destined for him, that he had loved her before he had ever met her. Why? Because you are a coward. Because you are afraid she will choose Moorhaven. Does she still feel anything for Lucian? The question cut like a blade. Because yes, she had run. But people ran and went back all the time. What if she decides to stay? What if she decides that kiss was a mistake, that she was confused, that she still loves Lucian? Then you lose her. Forever. Race opened his eyes, looking at her across the carriage. She was staring out the window, lost in her own thoughts, her face pale and tense. Beautiful. So beautiful it hurt to look at her. Tell her. Now. This is your last chance. But before he could open his mouth, before he could find the words, the carriage slowed to a stop. They had arrived. The Hale estate appeared at dusk, silhouetted against the orange sky. It was smaller than Elowen remembered, more worn. Paint was peeling in places, and the garden looked neglected. The carriage stopped in front of the main house. Ray stepped down first, then offered his hand to help her. When her fingers touched his, he gave a brief squeeze, a silent gesture of support. And then the front door burst open. Her mother appeared first, leaning on a maid. She was pale, thinner than Elowen remembered, with dark circles under her eyes. But when she saw Elowen, her face lit up. "Elowen!" she cried, suddenly trying to run, or at least move faster, across the garden. "Elowen! My daughter! My girl!" Elowen ran too, meeting her halfway. They collided in a tight embrace, both of them sobbing, her mother's hands gripping her as if she were afraid Elowen might vanish again. "Are you all right? Are you safe? Where have you been?" The questions poured out in a rush, but before Elowen could answer, her mother drew back, still holding her by the shoulders, her eyes scanning her face. And like a miracle, color began to creep back into her mother's cheeks. "Mother," Elowen whispered, fresh tears spilling over. "I am so sorry. I am so sorry." Her mother wiped the tears from her face with her thumb. "You are here now. That is all that matters." Elowen. The voice came from the doorway. Her father stood there, tall and stern, his arms crossed over his chest. His face did not show the same pure joy as her mother's. There was relief, yes, but also anger, disappointment. "Father," she said, her voice wavering. He descended the steps slowly, each one measured. When he reached her, he simply stood there, looking at her. And then, to Elowen's surprise, he pulled her into a quick, tight embrace. "You frightened us," he murmured in her ear. "Do not do that again." But when he stepped back, the hardness had returned to his features. "We have much to discuss." Then Elowen saw movement behind him. Evelyn appeared in the doorway, dressed in pale green, her blonde hair perfectly styled. Pretty as always. "Sister," Evelyn said, her voice too sweet. "How wonderful that you are back." Elowen did not answer. She did not trust her own voice. It was then that her father seemed to finally notice Rey's. He turned, his eyes widening at the sight of the Alpha King standing there, silent and imposing in all that black. "Your Majesty," her father said quickly, bowing. We were not expecting." "I brought your daughter home," Rey said simply, his voice calm. "She has been under my protection." The silence that followed was heavy. Elowen's father looked from Race to her, then back again, clearly bewildered. "Perhaps," Race went on, "we should speak inside." There is much to discuss. The sitting room was suffocating. Elowen sat on the sofa, her mother at her side gripping her hand tightly. Her father stood near the fireplace, arms crossed, face severe. Evelyn sat in an armchair, her hands delicately folded in her lap. But her eyes kept flicking between Elowen and Race with poorly hidden envy. And Race stood near the window, hands clasped behind his back. "So," her father began, his voice controlled but edged with steel, "are you going to explain what happened? Why you ran? Why you left us without a word?" Elowen swallowed. "I could not marry Lucian." "Could not." Her father raised a brow. "Or would not." "Both." She lifted her chin, forcing herself to meet his gaze. "I cannot marry him. I do not want to marry him." "And why not?" her mother asked, her voice gentle but worried. "You have known each other since childhood. You love each other." "No." The word came out louder than Elowen intended. "No, I do not love him. And he does not love me." "Of course he loves you," her father said, his patience clearly thinning. "He has been frantic looking for you. He came here 3 times asking for news. If that is not love..." "It is guilt," Elowen cut in. "He feels guilty. That is not love." "Guilty of what?" her mother asked, frowning. "Tell them. Tell the truth. About him and Evelyn." But when Elowen looked at her sister, she saw the panic in Evelyn's eyes, the fear, and despite everything, despite the betrayal, she could not do it. "Of pressuring me," she lied. "Of rushing the wedding. Of not giving me time to be sure." Her father let out a frustrated sound. "You had years to be sure, and now, suddenly, on the day of the wedding, you decide you are not?" "Yes," she said firmly. "Yes, that is exactly what happened." "Elowen, you know what this does to our family?" her mother asked, her voice pleading as she squeezed Elowen's hand. "We need this alliance. We need Moorhaven's money. Without it, we will lose everything." Guilt sliced through her chest like a blade. "I know. I am sorry. I truly am. But I cannot." "You can," her father said, taking a step toward her, his voice growing harder. "You can and you will. Moorhaven is still willing to marry you. He says he forgives your episode. That he understands you were frightened." "Episode?" Elowen shot to her feet, anger flaring. "It was not an episode. It was a decision." "A selfish decision," Evelyn murmured, quiet enough to sound innocent, but loud enough for everyone to hear. Elowen whirled toward her, eyes narrowing. "What did you say?" "Nothing," Evelyn said quickly, dropping her gaze. "Only that, well, the whole family is suffering because of your decision. That does seem a little selfish." "Her. She has the nerve to call me selfish when she..." "How dare you?" Elowen began, but her father cut her off. "Enough!" He slammed his hand against the fireplace mantel, the sound echoing through the room. "This ends now. Elowen, you will marry Moorhaven. There is no other option." "There is," she said, her voice shaking but steady. "I can say no. And condemn your entire family to ruin, to poverty." Her father stepped closer, his face flushing with anger. "Do you have any idea what people are saying? The scandal you have caused? No decent man will want you now. Moorhaven is your only chance." "Then I will die unmarried," she said, tears finally spilling over, "because I will not marry him." "Elowen. And how?" Her father suddenly turned to Race, as if just remembering his presence. "Did you end up with His Majesty?" Every eye shifted to Race. He had remained quiet throughout the entire argument, merely watching with that aggravating calm. But now, with all attention on him, he stepped forward. "I found her," he said simply, his voice steady. She was on the road, alone. I offered her shelter in my castle. It was all entirely proper, I assure you. Alowan's father studied him, eyes narrowing. You simply offered shelter? Without asking anything in return? Without asking anything. Race confirmed. And why would you do that? For a woman you barely know? Race smiled. That small, dangerous smile. Because any woman brave enough to run from her own wedding deserves a second chance. Silence crashed over the room. Elowen's father looked from Race to her and back again, clearly trying to make sense of it. Well, he said at last, we are grateful for your generosity, Your Majesty. But now Alowen is home, and she will fulfill her responsibilities to this family. I will not, Alowen said, her voice firm despite the tears. Father, I cannot. I will not. You will, he began, but her mother cut in. Dear, perhaps we should give her time. She just returned. She is clearly upset. She is being selfish, her father exploded. I am not being selfish for not wanting to marry a man I do not love, Elowen shouted back, her voice cracking. Then whom will you marry? Her father demanded. Who else would have you now, after this scandal? Crushed under the pressure from all sides, with her father shouting, her mother crying, and Evelyn watching with those cold eyes, something inside Alowen snapped. Race had been seconds away from stepping in and offering the family enough money that Elowen would not have to marry, when the words burst from Elowen's mouth before she could stop them. I am being courted by the king. The silence that followed was absolute. Everyone froze, as if turned to stone. Her mother stared at her, eyes wide. Her father's mouth hung open. And Evelyn? Evelyn had gone pale, her gaze fixed on Race with a mixture of horror and envy. Shit. What did I just do? The thought echoed in her mind as she slowly turned to look at Race. He stood near the window, utterly still, his eyes fixed on her with an expression she could not read. He is going to kill me. He is going to say I am lying. He is going to... But then, slowly, very slowly, a small smile curved his lips. Race thought, what a dangerous game, little troublemaker. The thought slid through his mind as he watched her, seeing the panic in her eyes, the way her hands trembled. She had just thrown them into an impossible situation. A lie they would have to uphold. A charade that could destroy everything. Or it could be exactly the opportunity he needed. Because if he confirmed, here and now, that he was courting her, she would be free. And he would have time. Time to make her truly fall in love with him. Time to prove he was more than some temporary refuge. It is a gamble, but you have never been afraid of risky bets. So he stepped forward, that small smile still on his lips, and said with absolute calm, It is true. The words hit like a bomb. Elowen's father spun so fast he nearly stumbled. What? It is true, Race repeated, walking toward Elowen with measured steps. When he reached her side, his hand found hers, fingers threading through hers. Lady Elowen has caught my attention, and I intend to court her properly. Elowen looked up at him, stunned, and he gave her a quick wink. Just follow my lead. But... Her father was speechless. Your Majesty, this is... I had no idea. Nor did we, Race said gently. It was unexpected. For both of us. But it happened. Elowen's mother was crying again, but this time from joy. You are... Oh, my girl. Oh, this is wonderful. Is it? Evelyn cut in suddenly, her voice sharp. Everyone turned to look at her. She was on her feet now, her hands clenched into fists at her sides. How do we know this is true? Maybe she is just lying to avoid marrying Lucian. Race's eyes narrowed dangerously. Are you calling me a liar? Evelyn went white. No, Your Majesty, it is all very sudden. Very convenient. Convenient, Race repeated, his voice dropping an octave. He released Eloin's hand and took a step toward Evelyn, who immediately backed away. You think a king would lie about courting someone out of convenience? No. Evelyn swallowed hard, her eyes wide. Because if that is what you are implying, Race went on, that fearsome king mask sliding perfectly into place, you are questioning my honor, and that is dangerous. The silence was so thick no one dared breathe. I apologize, Evelyn finally whispered, dropping her gaze. I did not mean to offend. Of course you did not, Race said, returning to Eloin's side. But Eloin saw something in his eyes when he looked at Evelyn. Something cold. As if he knew. As if he could see straight through her. Eloin's father cleared his throat, clearly trying to regain control of the situation. Well, this is unexpected. But Your Majesty surely understands that we need time to process this, to ensure our daughter's interests are protected. Of course, Race said easily. That is why I will return in 2 days. I have urgent matters in the kingdom, but when I come back we can discuss the proper arrangements. You are leaving? Eloin's mother sounded alarmed. But only for 2 days, Race assured her, and when I return, we can formalize the courtship properly. He turned to Eloin, and she saw something intense in his eyes. A promise. A warning. May I speak with you? He asked softly. In private. Eloin nodded, her voice stuck in her throat. She followed him out of the room, acutely aware of every pair of eyes on her, especially Evelyn's, which burned into her back with pure envy. They stopped in the corridor, far from curious ears. Race turned to her, and suddenly that calm mask shattered. He grabbed her shoulders, his eyes scanning her face. You just put us in an impossible situation, he said, but there was no anger in his voice. Only amusement. You realize that? I know, she whispered, tears welling again. I am sorry. I was not thinking. They were pressuring me and the words slipped out. He brushed a tear from her cheek with his thumb. Do not apologize. It was brilliant, actually. She blinked. It was? Now no one can force you to marry Moorhaven. You are being courted by a king. That changes everything. But it is a lie, she said, her voice breaking. And when they find out, who said it is a lie? The words froze her in place. She stared at him, her heart stuttering. Race hesitated, and for the first time since she had met him, he actually seemed nervous. I want to court you, for real, if you will let me. The world tilted. Eloin stared at that face, those intense eyes, and felt something explode in her chest. You do? More than anything, he admitted, his voice rough. But only if you want it to. That word echoed in her mind. For the first time in her life, someone was giving her a choice. A real choice. I choose you, she whispered. The smile that broke over his face was devastating. And then he leaned in, and she thought he was going to kiss her. Her heart racing, her whole body tipping toward him. Eloin? Evelyn's voice came from the end of the corridor. They sprang apart, and Eloin turned to see her sister standing there, her gaze darting between them with open suspicion. Mother is calling you, Evelyn said, her tone syrupy sweet. She wants to talk about the arrangements. Ray squeezed Elowen's hand one last time, then stepped back. I need to go. But Elowen, I will return soon. If you need me, think of me and I will come back even sooner. She did not quite understand what that meant, but she nodded. And then he turned and walked away, his footsteps echoing down the corridor, leaving Elowen standing there with Evelyn, feeling as if a part of her had just left with him. Chapter 5. The carriage was already far down the road by the time Race finally allowed the smile to fade from his face. He leaned back against the velvet seat, his hands clasped over his knees. The city was half a day's ride away, long enough to order what he needed and return before the second day was over. A ring. He had lied to her. There were no urgent matters in the kingdom. There was only this, the desperate need to go into the city, to the most talented jeweler he knew, and commission something worthy of her. Nothing is more urgent than her now. Nothing. Evelyn closed the bedroom door and turned the key. Her hands were shaking as she pulled paper and ink from the desk. Envy burned in her chest like acid, corroding everything it touched. The king. The damned king was courting Elowen. Her boring, plain sister was being courted by the most powerful man in the realm. It is not fair. It is not fair. She dipped the quill into the ink so violently she nearly tipped the bottle over. Her hand flew across the page, the words spilling out in a furious rush. Lord Moorhaven, Elowen has returned. She is at the Hale estate, and there is something you should know. She claims the Alpha King is courting her. I do not know if it is true or a lie, but I thought you should be aware. She is still here, alone. The king has left and will not return for 2 days. Evelyn folded the paper with trembling fingers and sealed it with wax. Then she called for a messenger, pressed coins into his hand and said, "Take this to Lord Moorhaven. It is urgent." When the messenger rode away, Evelyn sat on the bed, her heart pounding. Forgive me, sister, but you do not deserve him. You never deserved anything you have. 2 days felt like an eternity. Elowen wandered the estate like a ghost, unable to focus on anything. Her mother was better now, which was a relief. But her father still looked at her with that mix of confusion and distrust. And Evelyn watched her with eyes that burned with something dark. She decided to go for a walk, just to clear her head. She had barely reached the path that led into the woods when she heard footsteps behind her. Elowen. She froze. Slowly she turned and saw Lucien emerging from the trees, his face tense, eyes wild. He was not alone. 2 of his men stood behind him, blocking any path of escape. "Lucien," she said, forcing her voice to stay steady. "What are you doing here?" "What I am doing here." He let out a harsh laugh, taking a step toward her. "You run from our wedding, disappear for 2 weeks, and you ask what I am doing here?" "I did not run from you," she said, stepping back. "I ran from a wedding I did not want." "Lies." He took another step, anger blazing in his eyes. "You wanted me. You have always wanted me, since we were children. That was before you betrayed me." Lucien closed his eyes, his jaw clenching. "I already told you it was a mistake, a moment of weakness. I love you, Elowen. I have always loved you." "No." She shook her head, tears burning her eyes. "You do not love me. You never did." "I do!" he shouted, suddenly right in front of her, his hands closing around her shoulders. "I love you, and I regret it. Every day I regret it. Please, Elowen, come back to me." "No." She tried to pull away, but his fingers tightened. "Let go of me, Lucien." "That king," he said, his voice darkening. "He is dangerous. Do you know the things he has done? The stories about his family? They are cruel, Elowen. Monsters. You will regret staying with him." "He is more of a man than you will ever be," she spat. The slap came so fast she did not have time to dodge. Her head snapped to the side, pain exploding across her cheek. She staggered, stunned. "You are mine!" Lucian snarled, and suddenly his men were on her, grabbing her arms. "You have always been mine, and if you will not come willingly, then I will have to convince you." "No!" Helada screamed, struggling. "Let me go! Let me go!" But they were stronger. They dragged her to a carriage hidden among the trees, shoved her inside, and slammed the door. Lucian climbed in after her, and the carriage lurched into motion. "Where are you taking me?" she demanded, wiping furious tears from her face. "To somewhere that king will not find you," Lucian said, leaning back against the seat. The property was small, isolated, buried deep in the forest. Lucian hauled her inside, locked the door, and dismissed his men. Helada immediately backed away from him, searching for another way out. But the windows were locked, the door as well. Trapped. "I am trapped." Panic rose in her throat, but she forced it down. "Think. You need to think." And then she remembered. Rey's words whispered in her ear before he left. "If you need me, think of me and I will come back sooner." At the time she had thought it was just a figure of speech. But now, desperate and terrified, she closed her eyes and thought of him. "Rey, please, I need you. I am in danger. Please come back." And something inside her pulsed, as if an invisible cord had been yanked taut, vibrating through the air, stretching across the distance between them. Rey was almost at the Hale estate when he felt it. Pain, terror, pure panic. It was not his. It was hers. He shot to his feet so fast he slammed his head against the carriage roof. "Stop! Stop now!" The carriage had barely slowed before he jumped down, boots hitting the ground hard. His wolf surged to the surface, every instinct screaming a single word. Mate in danger. "Your Majesty?" the driver called, bewildered. But Rey did not answer. He was already running, ripping at his clothes, kicking off his boots. And then, in the middle of the road, he changed. Bones cracked and reformed. Muscles expanded. Black fur burst from his skin. And where a man had stood a moment earlier, now there was a wolf. Massive. Black as midnight. With eyes that gleamed like molten silver. He lifted his muzzle and scented the air. And there, riding the wind, he caught it. Her scent, her fear, the direction. And then he ran. Faster than any horse. "Hold on, my love. I am coming." Helada was backed against the wall when she heard it. A howl. Low, deep. It made the windows rattle in their frames. Lucian froze, his head snapping toward the door. "What?" And then the door exploded. Wood flew in every direction as something huge, a black wolf, burst through, landing in the middle of the room on 4 paws. Helada screamed, throwing her arms over her face. When she lowered her hands, she saw it. A wolf, but not just any wolf. It was enormous, the size of a horse, its black fur gleaming even in the dim light. And its eyes were silver gray. Familiar. Rey. "Impossible," Lucian whispered, stumbling back. "How did you—" The wolf growled, a low, threatening sound that made the floor tremble. Then, slowly, he padded toward Lucian. But Lucian changed too. Bones snapped, brown fur erupted, and a smaller, though still large, wolf stood where he had been. The 2 wolves faced one another, circling, and then they attacked. It was fast, brutal. Rey was bigger, stronger, faster. He caught Lucian by the throat and slammed him against the wall so hard the wood cracked. Lucian tried to rise, tried to fight back, but Rey was on him in an instant, teeth at his neck, a warning growl rolling from his chest. Submit or die. Lucian went still. Then, slowly, he bared his throat. Submission. Defeat. Reyes held him there a moment longer, making sure the message was clear. Then he released him and stepped back. Lucian staggered to his feet, blood dripping from wounds at his neck and side. He looked at Elowen once, something like regret in his wolf eyes. Then he bolted, disappearing through the shattered doorway. The black wolf turned, and his gaze locked with Elowen's. For a moment, they simply stared at one another. Then slowly, the wolf began to change. Bones cracked, fur retreated, and where the wolf had stood, a man now knelt. Reyes, naked, breathless. His skin slick with sweat and streaked with blood that was not his. Elowen did not think. She grabbed a blanket from the sofa and ran to him, wrapping it around his shoulders. "Are you all right?" he asked, his hands coming up to her face, her shoulders, as if checking she was whole. "Did he hurt you?" "I am fine," she whispered, though tears were streaming down her cheeks. "You came. I thought of you and you came." "Always," he said, his voice breaking. "I will always come." And then the mask dropped. That king's mask, of control, of power, of unshakable calm, shattered, leaving only the man, raw, terrified. "You nearly killed me," he said, pressing his forehead to hers. "When I felt your fear, when I realized you were in danger, I could not breathe. I could not think. I could only run." "How did you feel it?" she asked, her hands cradling his face. "Because you are my mate," he said, finally speaking the words aloud. "My soul bond. I have been dreaming of you for a year or more, Elowen. Every night. Your fears, your joys, your laughter. I knew you before I ever met you." She stared at him, eyes wide. "What do you mean?" He smiled, though there were tears in his eyes as well. "And when I finally saw you, when I finally found you, you were promised to another man. It was agony, watching you with him, knowing you were mine and not being able to touch you. Reyes, I lied," he went on, the words tumbling out. "When I said I had urgent business, I did not. I went to buy this." He reached for the pocket of his discarded coat and pulled out a small box, opening it. The ring inside flashed. "I was going to ask you to marry me, truly, properly. But then you were taken and I—" His voice broke. Elowen watched tears spill down his face, tears he did not try to hide. "I thought I was going to lose you," he whispered. "And I cannot live without you, even if you do not love me, even if all you feel is desire. I will take it. I will take whatever part of you you are willing to give." "Reyes," she said, her voice steady now. She held his face between her hands, forcing him to look at her. "I love you." He went still. "What?" "I love you," she repeated, smiling through her tears. "Not just desire, not just attraction. Love. Real. I love you." The sound he made was half laugh, half sob. Then he pulled her into his arms, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe. "You can feel me," he murmured against her ear. "When you think of me, when you need me, you will feel it. That is how mates work. We are connected. Forever." "Forever," she echoed, and the word had never felt so right. Then he kissed her. It was not gentle. It was desperate, hungry, as if he needed to prove to himself that she was truly there, truly safe, truly his. His hands were in her hair, on her back, pulling her closer, and she clung to him just as fiercely. When they finally broke apart, they were both shaking. "Marry me," he said, still holding her. "Marry me." "Yes," she said, laughing and crying at once. Yes. She stopped, remembering the ban on clichés, and he laughed too, that beautiful sound she loved. He slid the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly. When they returned to the Hale estate, the family was waiting, and when Evelyn saw them walk in together, saw the ring on Elowen's finger, she crumbled. "I am so sorry," she sobbed, dropping to her knees. "I was horrible. I told him where you were. I was so jealous. Please forgive me." Elowen looked at her sister for a long moment. Then she knelt, taking Evelyn's hands in her own. "You were wrong," she said firmly. "But you are my sister. And I forgive you." Evelyn sobbed harder, dragging her into a desperate hug. Race watched them, and when Elowen's parents approached, nervous and unsure, he said, "I will help your family financially, not as payment for Elowen, but because she cares about you, and I care about her." Elowen's father, proud even in defeat, inclined his head. "Thank you, Your Majesty, and I am sorry for pushing her so hard." "Just love her," Race said simply. "That is all I ask." 3 weeks later, the wedding was small, intimate. Only close family and Race's most important advisors were present. The ceremony took place at sunset, in the mountains, overlooking the valleys below. Elowen wore a white dress that flowed like water. Her hair was loose, wild around her shoulders, with wildflowers woven through the brown strands. And as she walked toward Race, who waited at the simple stone altar, she felt no fear, only certainty. He wore black, as always, but there was something different about him now. Something lighter, as if a weight had finally been lifted from his shoulders. They exchanged vows. Simple, honest. "I promise to love you," she said, her voice steady. "To choose you, every day, forever. I promise to protect you," he said, those gray eyes fixed on hers. "To respect you, to make you laugh, and to give you all the hot chocolate you want." She laughed, tears spilling over, and then he kissed her, and everyone around them cheered. But the true ceremony came later, when they were alone. The mating ritual was ancient, mystical. Race led her to a clearing in the forest, where the full moon shone high above, bathing everything in silvery light. They stood barefoot on the grass, and he drew her close, his hands cradling her face with a tenderness that contrasted with the intensity in his eyes. "This will hurt a little," he whispered, his voice rough. "But only for a moment. And then," she asked, her heart racing. "And then you will feel me, always, in every breath, in every heartbeat." He bent his head, his lips brushing the spot where her pulse throbbed at her neck. "Are you ready?" "Yes," she whispered. Then he bit. It was not savage, but it was deep. His teeth broke her skin, and she gasped at the sharp pain that shot through her. Almost immediately, though, the pain shifted into something else. Heat. A burning rush, as if molten fire were being poured into her veins. And then something changed. The air grew warmer. She felt something open in her chest, as though a locked door had been thrown wide. Suddenly she could feel him, not just physically, emotionally. His feelings, his thoughts, like a soft whisper at the edge of her mind. Love, joy, devotion, peace, possessiveness, protectiveness. "Do you feel it?" he murmured against her skin, his tongue soothing the mark he had made. "I feel it," she breathed, awestruck, her fingers rising to touch the spot where he had bitten her. It was hot, pulsing. Race drew back just enough to meet her gaze, something fierce and possessive blazing in his expression. Now we are bound, completely. You are mine, and I am yours. We belong to each other. Epilogue. Months later, Helada stood at the giant bedroom window in the castle, watching the sun rise over the mountains. The view never grew old. It always stole her breath. Strong arms slid around her from behind, pulling her against a warm chest. She smiled, leaning back into him. "Cannot sleep?" Race murmured in her ear, his voice rough with sleep. "Just admiring the view," she said, covering his hands with hers. "So am I." But when she glanced back at him, she saw he was not looking at the mountains. He was looking at her. "You are impossible," she laughed. "And you love me for it," he said, wearing that small, cocky smile she adored. "Unfortunately," she said, pretending to sigh. He turned her in his arms, drawing her closer, his eyes dancing with amusement. "Unfortunately?" "Terribly," she replied, but she was smiling. "Well," he murmured, leaning in closer, "then I suppose I will have to change your mind." "You can try," she challenged. And he did. And he succeeded. Several times. Later, lying in his arms, listening to his steady heartbeat beneath her ear, Helada thought about how her life had changed. From a woman about to marry the wrong man to the queen of a kingdom, mate to the most powerful man she knew. "What are you thinking about?" Race asked, his fingers idly playing with her hair. "How lucky I am," she said honestly. "Lucky?" He raised a brow. "You slapped a king, jumped into his carriage while running from a wedding, threw a shoe at him, and you think you are lucky?" She laughed, the sound echoing through the room. "Yes, very lucky." He pulled her closer, kissing the top of her head. "Then that makes two of us." And there, in that castle in the mountains, with the stars shining overhead and the man she loved at her side, Helada finally understood what it meant to be whole. Not because a man completed her, but because she had chosen. She had fought. She had run from what was wrong and sprinted toward what was right. And now, at last, she was free.